you today? Wonderful day. It's Kane's birthday, the half king. Yay. Super happy about that. It's nice when we have birthdays to celebrate. All of a sudden, now Kane is 11, halfway to becoming a man. 11 and a half, half birthday. Okay, first of all, I need a volunteer. Thank you, Vanessa. You volunteered. No, but you don't have to do anything yet. You have an assignment, though, that nobody else has. But it's super easy, and I think it's kind of cool. We're going to start doing what's called a Medal of Honor Monday. And for you guys, well, it will be Monday. For the other class, it'll be Tuesday. But I've decided that we spend way too much time in society talking about all the jerks and jackwagons that we have. You know, people that aren't super popular, that haven't necessarily done anything heroic, that don't really deserve to be talked about. Yet we have these billions and zillions of people, not literally but figuratively, in our history that have done really cool things. So if you're in the third or fifth block, because this is being recorded right now, someone in those classes, one person needs to take on the role of being in charge of the Medal of Honor Monday. So here's what you do. A Medal of Honor is the highest award given by the United States government. It's only given to people that have done something that's above and beyond what could be expected of any man or woman. Most Medal of Honor winners are men, probably 99% of them are men, because for most of our history, it's been men that have been the military operators, and it's usually a military award. So what I want you to do, Vanessa, since you volunteered, thank you. By next Monday, all you got to do is Google United States Medal of Honor recipients or winners. Find one. There's going to be a list. It's like a website with a list. Just click on one, and you can find a picture of them. Fine, print it off. If not, no big deal. And come to class on Monday prepared to tell us, just really briefly, the story of what this guy did that makes him so heroic. So this guy fought during World War II, and he blah, 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 blah. That's it. Super simple. Because I think we need to spend more time remembering and acknowledging the awesome bravery and the awesomeness that makes America America. We don't even know about that stuff most of the time. So it's pretty rare. We're talking hundreds given, not thousands given. Actually, you might even, if you want to, ask in your family tree. There could be someone that you're connected to that has won a Medal of Honor. My great-great-grandfather was a Medal of Honor winner. And when I look up his name, it's really unfortunate because it was in 1863 in Vicksburg, Mississippi. He was fighting under Ulysses Grant in the American Civil War. So he was a Union soldier, American Civil War. But all it says is like gallantry in a charge against the Confederates and the siege of Vicksburg, 1863. So it doesn't really say gallantry. It doesn't really say what he did, but it had to be something spectacular. You don't just get one for being really good at being a soldier. So, for instance, if we were in the military and the 25 of us are in the chow hall eating lunch, and a bad guy pops in the door and chucks a grenade in the room, and Zach dives on top of it. When grenades explode, they send little pieces of, it's called shrapnel, little pieces of metal in all directions. If someone were to throw a grenade into this room, whoever is right in the middle of the room where the grenade is probably going to die. And those of us that are on the outside parts of the room, we might die or we might be wounded, but it's going to do damage to almost everyone. If Zach dives on top of it, his body is going to absorb the impact of all of that shrapnel, which means that he is for sure going to die, but in the process, he saved all of us. That's something that's above and beyond what could be expected of any person. He knew by diving on top of that hand grenade that he was going to die, but he did it anyway. That's an example of what some of these Medal of Honor winners have done. So obviously, some Medal of Honor recipients receive the award posthumously, which means after they're dead. Because, is that what you were going to ask? because it doesn't make any difference if they live or die. What they did was something that the U.S. government, the U.S. military could not ask a person to do. Sacrifice your life to save everybody else. So it very well could be that the person that received your award never actually received it. Maybe their children received it for them. So in 2 minutes, it's not a big homework assignment. And then next week, I'm going to ask for somebody else. So I guess if you're sitting in Win and you're like, I got nothing to do, you could take 2 minutes and you could pre-do that assignment. And then next week, when I ask for a volunteer, you'd be like, I already got it. Don't worry about it. So I'm not asking for a lot. And you really don't get anything for it other than thank you. And probably by the end of the year, most of you are going to take a turn. So once Vanessa's done, she doesn't have to do it again. Somebody else is doing it the week after, and then the week after, and then the week after. But it's pretty cool, actually. There's some of them that are superheroes, like the most decorated soldier, American soldier in World War II, was a man named Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy actually, after the war, went on to become a movie star. In fact, several of the roles that he played in the movies were himself in war movies, because the guy did so many really cool things. Or there's a man that fought in World War I. His name slips my mind right now. It'll hit me any minute now. But the dude captured 150 Germans by himself in one battle, because he was so fierce that the Germans that surrendered to him thought that he was a whole bunch of Germans. So I think stories like that need to be told, and we need to be reminded that there are super brave, heroic people, and they surround us regularly. But sometimes we don't know that. By the way, if great-great-grandpa had a Medal of Honor and you find it in a trunk in grandma's attic, it is against the law to sell it. It's also against the law to buy one. So if you ever see one on eBay, medals that are given by the military, you're not supposed to buy or sell. The Medal of Honor being the highest award, it can be given, but it can't be bought or sold. So like back in my cabinet, I have a Bronze Star. It's like the next level down from a Medal of Honor. It's for doing something extraordinary in the face of great danger. That Bronze Star was given to me by a friend whose grandfather earned it fighting in World War II. And again, don't know the exact story, know parts of the story. So it's pretty neat to look at that. But the people that we talk about in the news, like President Biden and President Trump and President Obama and President Bush and President Clinton and President Bush and President Reagan, most of those guys are pretty ordinary and haven't really done anything spectacular, except for the service to their country is political and not military. In fact, if we want to go back and find a war hero among those men, George H.W. Bush was a fighter pilot in World War II. That's the closest thing we've got. In fact, President Biden, no military service. Is it required? No. President Trump, no military service. President Obama, no military service. President Bush, Texas Air National Guard. So he served, but he didn't fight, so you get credit for that. President Clinton, no military service. Then we got a fighter pilot in World War II. So we can go back and find those people throughout our history, but they're rare-ish. So please do that. You can just take 2 minutes, and you don't even have to write anything down if you have a good memory. Introduce us to your person. What is their name? What war were they fighting in? And what do they do that gets them awarded this medal? Some of them are long stories, and some of them are short stories.
So when I looked it up, it said they also get like a monthly payment or something like that, like 1,000.
A Medal of Honor winner does.
Yeah.
Cool.
Like, if they die, where does that end up?
It probably depends. In a lot of cases, their spouse or their children. In some cases, it ends at some point. Like this doesn't have anything to do with the Medal of Honor, but just an example of how a lot of times stuff works in the world. When I retire, I'll receive a pension. That's my retirement from teaching. I can set it up so that if I think my wife is going to outlive me, I can set it up so that when I die, she'll receive it until she dies. That way she's taken care of. But typically then it's a smaller amount. So I can, if I think I'll outlive my wife, then probably not. then I'll set it up so that I get all of it, and it'll be a bigger amount, or I can take maybe 75% forever until my wife passes away, and then my pension ends, so it doesn't go to my children. Good question. Anybody that owes a retake or wants to do a retake, that needs to be done by the end of the day Wednesday. Don't plan on doing it today after school. If you want to do it today during WIN, that'll work, but after school doesn't work for me because I'm leaving for a dentist appointment. So those people 3rd and 5th block, the reason why you're watching a video is because I'm in the scariest place on earth. I am scared to death to go to the dentist, so right now I'm nervous, actually. That might sound like a really wussy thing, but I'm not afraid to admit that the dentist is a scary place for me. It's a special dentist because I had a toothache about a month ago. So next week I'm going to be gone. I don't remember what day, but it should be opposite of you guys, to have surgery on that tooth. So today he's not even going to do anything, and I'm still nervous about going. He's just going to figure out what his plan is to fix my sore tooth. Nerves. Anyway, so today after school doesn't work because I'm not going to be here. Tomorrow after school, before school, whatever, that'll be fine. All right, did we get here-ish? Remember talking about literacy rates and comparing the education of colonists versus those people in England? And colonists already, by 2 generations in, have a higher level of education than the people that were our relatives in England. I think that's kind of an interesting thing. And males obviously more likely to be educated, and in most places against the law to teach slaves to read and write. So having an education was definitely a door to opportunity to do more stuff, to increase your lot in life. And we see that even still today to a great extent. And it's not so much that you have to go to college to be successful, but you can get an education in a different way. Kind of like in the old days when they did apprenticeships. So maybe your education is, I'm going to learn how to be a really good welder. And if you become a really good welder, you're going to make significantly probably more money than what I make, and I have a bachelor's degree and 2 master's degrees. So that kind of thing really can promote you because that's a skill that not very many people have. Everybody can weld. Not everyone can weld good. So if you get good at it and you have a skill like that, you can make a ton of money. Or if you learn how to weld underwater, that's a skill that very, very small percentage of the population has. So the more skill that you've got, and that's derived from the type of education that you have. And education doesn't always mean sitting in a classroom. It can mean in the workforce, the better opportunity you have to make a solid living. It's pretty simple, actually. So you pick up skills. Garbage man has skills that not everyone has. Not everyone wants that job. It pays pretty good to be a trash man, but think about the difficulty of it. In the summer when it's 100 degrees, you still have to work, hauling garbage and sweating and roasting. And in the winter when it's -20 and snowy and slushy and icy, you're still picking up garbage. So days like today when it's going to be 70 degrees and sunny, got to be like a perfect day for people that are working outside. Or men that pour concrete or women that pour concrete. All of those types of jobs require an education in that field. It may not be super difficult, but it's a skill that not everyone has. I lack the skill of pouring concrete. If you have the skill, I need some concrete work done, so you can come work for me. Anyway, that has something to do with education. And back in the old days, you really didn't need a high school education or a college education. Sort of more optional. And I probably told you the story of my grandfather when he finished 8th grade graduation. He wanted to be a farmer, so there wasn't any reason to continue to go to school. He could learn what he needed to know from his dad. Pretty rare for us today to be able to do that. If dad's a farmer, you're going to business school or agronomy school or someplace where you can learn the skills, maybe even greater skills than what your father can give you. So all of this talk about education leads us into a time period called the Enlightenment. Enlightenment is where we start to explain things using reasoning, which just means let's think this through for a minute. Instead of just saying, it is that way because. No, we say, it is that way because of this. So we start to explain things using a methodology, the scientific method, and hypothesis, and testing hypothesis, and testing our theory with hypothesis. All of those things kind of become important. So people like Benjamin Franklin, he's kind of the face of the Enlightenment in America, where he starts questioning things. Now, I'm not going to be the person that tries to tell you that science explains all of the issues that take place in the world, because I don't want anyone going home and saying, Mr. Bellamy says the church isn't important, because I'm kind of one of those outliers that believe there's probably a place for both, combination of the two. And I think they have to fit together. I know that when you were born, billions of things have to happen exactly perfectly for you to be you. Exactly perfectly. And it happens more often than not. So I think that there's something beyond just science that allows for that to happen. But we also can explain why things go wrong using science sometimes. So Franklin, he starts out as a writer. Actually wants to be a printer, like setting type for a printing press. And usually in order to be a printer, you have to be an apprentice to a printer first. Franklin's problem was there was already a printer in his town. That's good, actually, because he could apprentice to that person and learn how to do that trade. But it was his big brother. Big brothers don't always believe in little brothers. Usually big brothers think little brothers are kind of ding-dongs and doofuses, right? And they don't really listen to you. But Ben Franklin was super-duper smart. So he starts writing letters, like interesting, entertaining letters that he wants Big Brother to print in his newspaper. Big Brother controls the newspaper, and since the brother owns the newspaper, whatever gets printed is under his control totally. The people that manage the Omaha World Herald get to pick the stories. They can leave stuff out that's really, really good if they want to. So Franklin's going to his brother with these stories, and he's like, here, put this in your paper. And older brother's like, beat it, kid. Go play in the street. And Franklin's dejected. He's like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to get started? So he creates a pen name. Anybody know what a pen name is? What, Patty? It's a fake name, right? Just for that. Lots of artists use pen names. I don't really call them pen names for artists, but Cardi B's name is not Cardi B. It's something weird. But we know her as Cardi B. Or probably the most famous American author to use a pen name is Mark Twain. Mark Twain writes Huckleberry Finn along with several other American literature pieces. His name's not Mark Twain. There is no man named Mark Twain in American history. His name's Samuel Clemens. Why does he use Mark Twain? I don't know why he had a pen name. Sometimes it's because it sounds cooler. Excuse me, like artists. Sometimes not. In this instance, Franklin's like, I want my stuff published in the newspaper, so he uses a pen name, Silence Dogood. He sends these letters anonymously to his brother's newspaper, and his brother's like, oh, this is hilarious. This is good stuff. Most of it was funny. So he prints these in his paper with the name Silence Dogood attached. He doesn't know that Silence Dogood is Ben Franklin. So Franklin uses, probably throughout his life, 20 different pen names because he wants to stay anonymous, because later his writing is going to have to do with fighting for independence. So Franklin is well known for that. Poor Richard, it's kind of a pen name. Everybody knows that it's Benjamin Franklin, but he writes an almanac. Now, I think your link is dead, and I'm not going to spend much time going into this, but an almanac is just a book full of information. It's before we had the Google, before we had Wikipedia to answer questions for us quickly, before Vanessa could just look online and find a Medal of Honor recipient and spend 2 minutes doing research. If this were the old days before we had access to computers and the internet, if I wanted to know something, I'd say, pull out an almanac. There's probably a couple in the back cabinet there. And I want to know the capital of Kuwait. And you're like, well, I don't know what that is. So you open an almanac and it tells you the capital. I say, I want to know the population of Qatar. Well, nobody knows that, but the almanac has that. So it's like a all-everything book. What's the size of the military of Russia? Boom, here it is, right here. So it's really a useful book. This almanac was more entertainment. So the other kind of almanac that we have today is like a farmer's almanac. It's the most popular. Farmers buy it now. Everyone buys it because it's full of good information. Like it'll tell you, it'll predict the future, and it'll tell you when is the best day next spring to plant your potatoes. So old people especially that believe in the use of the farmer's almanac pull that sucker out, and they're like, oh, we're supposed to plant our potatoes on March 1st, and they will be out planting their potatoes on that day because that's the best day. Or when's the best day to plant your corn? You're going to get the best yield if you plant on this day. And it's kind of a guess. Or the Farmer's Almanac tells us this year, the winter of 2022, is going to be colder and heavier snow than average. So if we believe the Farmer's Almanac to be true, what does that tell us about snow days this winter? We're going to have more of them. Now, does anybody really know? No. In fact, it's kind of a guess. I could say it's going to be cold and snowy, and Abby says it's going to be warm and dry. One of us is going to be right. There's like a 50-50 chance. Probably you. We need actually the snow this year. I don't really care if we have snow days or not, but we need the snow. His almanac had stuff like that, except it was meant to entertain. So, like one of the quotes inside the Poor Richard's Almanac was, "Fish and guests stink after 3 days." Like, what does that mean? Well, if you leave fish in the trash can after 3 days, it's going to stink. Or if you have visitors that come stay at your house, is it true that 3 days is about the max and then you're ready for them to go away so you can have your house back? Even if it's your grandparents who you love very much, it's like, okay, I'm ready to get back to normal. I'm tired of playing Yahtzee with grandma every evening. Go away. 3 days is like the max. So people kind of found it interesting. He also does these cool scientific experiments. What's the most famous Benjamin Franklin experiment? The kite and the key. He's messing with electricity. Now it says here, he does not discover electricity, but he plays with it. He does maybe make a discovery that lightning is a form of electricity. In fact, his kite and key experiment aren't to determine if lightning is electricity. He's already fairly sure of that. But his most famous experiment, nobody even knows this, is to try to store electricity from lightning. We still can't do that today. Benjamin Franklin was messing with it. Excuse me. Think about that. If we could store the power of a lightning bolt in a battery, a really, really large battery, we probably wouldn't need solar panels and windmills. We could just power everything off of lightning because it is that intense of a source of electricity. Was there danger in the kite and key experiment? Probably. In fact, when Benjamin Franklin did the kite and key experiment, he wasn't even holding it. He handed it off to his son, like, here, hold this. And then he took off and hid it. What a coward. But if you look at the ground next to the kite and key experiment, there's this little jar. Nobody ever notices that. That's called a Leyden jar. It's like a jar that's coated with lead on the inside and contains an acid. It's an early battery. And Leyden jars actually worked. He could hold electricity in that battery for a limited amount of time. Just like a car battery. Eventually, a car battery, if you just leave it sit, will go dead. But as long as you use it in your car and your car recharges it as you're driving, it goes for years before it wears out. So the kite and the key. Now, was there a threat that are going to be electrocuted? Only if the lightning misses the key and strikes them. Because they're holding a piece of string that holds the kite. How well does cloth or string conduct electricity? Not very good. So if anything, probably by holding that piece of string, it might make the hair on your arm stand up. You're going to feel it. It might buzz you a little bit. You're going to feel it. but it's not going to electrocute you. It's sort of like, how many of you have ever accidentally or maybe even on purpose grabbed an electric fence? Yeah, it hurts, but it doesn't really hurt. It's a weird sensation, like, yeah, right? Your arm kind of goes numb for half a second, and you're not really sure. Now, electric fences that are made to keep animals in are really kind of cool because they send a pulse of electricity, like once a second. And it does that because if it was solid electricity, your hand would sort of freeze to it and you couldn't let go, and eventually it would electrocute you. This is why when you see stuff on the news, they say, don't pick up down power lines, because that is one solid surge of electricity running through it. And if you pick it up, it's really weird, but you won't be able to let go, and it will fry you. It will literally cook you. If someone's doing that, the only way you might be able to save them is you get a run at it and you try to tackle them away from it. But at the same time, you're taking a risk, because if you grab onto the person that's holding the power wire, it goes through them and into you. So the best trick you can possibly do if you're near an electric fence with your friend is you take their hand without them knowing you're going to do this, and you grab the electric fence. That power will run right through you and it will shock the snot out of them. Seriously, it works. Trust me on this one. But it just is a jolt of electricity. You're like, how can that one little wire keep a cow in? Well, cows aren't stupid. So the first time they see that little wire, they test it because they see green grass on the other side. So a cow will walk up and they'll look at that little tiny wire like, what is this? And they'll put their nose up to it and snap, it'll get them. And they're like, moo! They don't like that very much. And they're like, what the heck? So they try it again, snap, moo! And after that, that cow isn't going anywhere near that wire because it recognizes touching that wire hurts my nose. Same thing as you and I. We're really cautious. If you've touched an electric fence, you're really cautious about doing it again. That's experimentation. Maybe you're dumb enough that you'll try it because your friend tells you to. Well, that's between you and your friend. But his son really wasn't in any danger. I've got a story about his son later on, too. But he discovers lots of really cool stuff, and he's got a sweet haircut. We call that a skullet because it's a mullet with no hair on top. But if we look at some of the other stuff Benjamin Franklin is responsible for, by the way, there is a story, and I don't know how true it is, but if you would go visit Benjamin Franklin, like at his home, because he had a printing press in his garage, basically, in his carriage house. If you visited him at home, there's a really good chance that he would answer the door completely naked, because he thought he did his best thinking with no clothes on. I don't know what happened here. Oh, so look at this. His inventions: swim fins. He liked to go swimming, probably naked. And he put fins on his feet and his hands, and it made him go faster. Well, duh. A stove that would more efficiently heat a house. A lightning rod. This is one of my favorites. The guy really liked messing with electricity. Does anybody in here live in a really old house in the country, or maybe even in town? Okay, next time you're driving through the countryside and you see an old farmhouse or an old barn, sometimes you'll notice sticking up off the roof of those buildings are like 3-foot tall metal spikes. And you might ask yourself, what the heck are those? Are they television antenna, radio? No. Those are called lightning rods. And back in colonial times, they had major issues when lightning storms would come through. We know that they strike the highest point in an area, which is usually the top of a house or the steeple of a church. Or if you're standing on a golf course in a lightning storm holding a 9-iron straight in the air, you're going to get struck by lightning. So you drop the 9-iron if there's lightning in the area, and you lay close to the ground, and the lightning is probably not going to hit you. You don't go under a tree in a lightning storm because it's tall. So lightning would hit houses, it would light them on fire, and it would burn them to the ground. So Benjamin Franklin was trying to resolve the issue of lightning burning houses up. So he put these metal rods on the roof of the house, and each of those metal rods on those old houses are connected to a cable which runs down through the walls and out into the ground outside the house. So lightning
follows that metal cable through the house and out into the ground, and its energy is dispersed into the earth. It's grounded. They work. The problem is we don't use lightning rods today because, well, a lot of it has to do with the type of electronics that we have in our homes. If a lightning bolt strikes anywhere near your house, like within feet of your house, it doesn't even have to hit your house, it's going to fry all the electronics in your house. That's why you put expensive surge protectors on your expensive TVs and your computers and stuff like that, because the electricity will cook them. So you don't want that lightning rod attracting lightning to your house. It might protect your house from burning down, but it's going to cause problems otherwise. A flexible catheter. Some of you are squirming a little bit. Most of you have no idea what that is. If you ever have to go in for surgery that's going to take a while, they're going to stick a catheter, which is just a flexible tube, up ya to drain the urine out of you. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or girl, this flexible catheter goes in you. So I'm not sure what they used before it was flexible. Like today it would be a small rubber tube. I don't know. Let's stick this iron pipe up you. I think not. So thank you, Benjamin Franklin, for that. Bifocals, what's that? Two different lenses on the same lens. So some of you are like, huh? What? Okay, how many of you, raise your hands, wear glasses or contacts? I can tell the glasses wearers, but contact wearers, I can't tell sometimes. Okay, not quite half the class. Most of you wear glasses or contacts because you have trouble seeing distances. True? You have trouble with close vision? Reading, so stuff up close. So my eyes, for instance, for almost all of my life, I've worn glasses or contacts, or I had LASIK surgery. I could read this just fine, a book, but I have trouble reading that from a distance. My prescription's actually not bad, so I can read that no matter where I'm at in the room, even without my glasses. But a few years ago, I got to the point where, for some reason, I think it's nearsighted when you can't see far away, and it's farsighted when you can't see near. When you get old, your eyes change even more, and all of a sudden I couldn't read instruction manuals or pill bottles. So I couldn't read stuff up close. So my glasses, these are actually my old glasses, so these are not bifocals. My newer ones that I hate wearing are bifocals. Old people tend to have them. Or Mrs. Harmon, for instance, she's farsighted. So if you're in her class, you'll notice that she has several different pairs of glasses laying around, usually one on her head and one on her desk. When she needs to read something, she has to put glasses on because she can't read it. A pair of bifocals allows both nearsighted and farsighted. So people that have them, and it used to be easy in the old days to tell because you could see like a half moon shaped lens built into them. Yeah, your dad, sometimes they still have. The ones that I have are called progressive, which means the bottom half of the lens is for reading. You can't tell by looking at them that they're a bifocal. The top half is for distance. So you'll notice that a lot of times older people, it's usually older people that wear bifocals, when they read, they hold the book or whatever they're reading down here because they're reading through the bottom half of their lens. But when they're driving, they're looking through the top half of their lens because they need to see distances. So it takes a little getting used to wear those lenses, but that's way ahead of its time. Benjamin Franklin apparently had both those issues and didn't want two sets of glasses, so he came up with a solution. This guy's got lots of good ideas. Not all of his ideas are as good as mine, but some of them are. First library in America in Philadelphia. First volunteer fire department. Colleges, the first public hospital in the Pennsylvania Hotel. An insurance company. Daylight savings times. The common cold is passed from person to person through indoor air. So Benjamin Franklin is making a premise, a hypothesis, that there are things that exist that we cannot see that can harm us. Bacteria and viruses. Pretty smart guy. Anyway, this guy's a genius. He knows everything about everything. And he was quite the ladies' man. The ladies really liked Benjamin Franklin. Talking about the spread of the common cold. Last Thursday in class, I was standing in the front of the room in third block. This desk was empty right here. There wasn't anybody in it. Just like right now. So I had my hydro flask and my clicker and everything sitting right on it. And take a drink out of my hydro flask. It's kind of nice to have an empty desk. Fifth block, Guerin was sitting right here at this desk. She's listening to this right now, and she probably is laughing and horrified at the same time. But I was standing in front of this desk doing whatever it is I do, and I look down and there's my hydro flask. So I pick it up and I took a big drink, and I was like, I could taste like, I don't know, chapstick or something that wasn't mine. And then I looked down and realized it wasn't my hydro flask, it was Guerin's. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never done that before. But I'm like, Guerin, I do have a cold, so you might want to wash that before you drink out of it. So if you sit in the front row and you have a hydro flask, probably make sure it's sealed up or put it under your desk, or I'm just going to take it and start drinking out of it. Okay, here's the deal. The French and the British are arguing over the territory in the Ohio River Valley. So on the map over there, it's that area where the red dot is, kind of west of Pennsylvania. It's full of furry creatures. They both want it for trade. Fishing and furs. Those are the two big things. In fact, you might be like, furs? Okay, the two richest men on the planet at this time, all the way up into the mid-1800s, owned fur trading companies. So they were the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musk of the time because furs were that valuable. So they both wanted, the British and the French. They both claimed that territory. The Indians choose sides. And they're going to pick, excuse me, they're going to pick the French more often than not because the French are nice to them. The French tolerate Native American ways. So yeah, if I'm French and you're Native Americans, I'm like, you guys are weird, but you be you. Whereas the British were like, you guys are weird, stop it. Become more like the British. The French are going to be good this way. The French even married Native American women that the British would have looked down on. Like, those women are not good enough. You can't marry them. Whereas the French were like, we, blah, blah. They just marry them, and once they're part of the family, they get the trait. They do try to convert them to Christianity, but they don't argue about their polytheistic ways. If you're Native Americans and you have many gods, the French are going to be like, well, that's weird. You be you. But if you'd like to try this Christianity thing, we have one God, it's a lot easier. So they spread Christianity, and all good Christians would do the same thing. If I came to school, let's say that some of you are churchy people and you go to church regularly. If I came to school one day and I said, man, I'm just really tired of my church. I don't understand it. I don't believe the things the pastor is preaching about, and I don't think I want to go anymore. If you belong to a church, what is your job as a member of that church? One of your jobs. Yeah, you'd be like, hey, Mr. Bellamy, why don't you go to church with my family on Sunday and see what you think about my church? Or sometimes you guys do that. And, hey, we got youth night Wednesday night. I know you're not part of my church. You want to go along? And that's kind of how you spread your version of Christianity. Or even not Christianity. It doesn't matter. That's how all churches work and function. Oh, you don't like your church? Come with me once. Maybe you'll like mine. And I go to your church, and if I like it, maybe I join up, and then all of a sudden, you've done your job. So that's what the French are doing to the Native Americans. It's not so much forcing them, because none of you are coming to me and saying, hey, go with me to church. I mean it. You need to see it. Because when you tell someone they have to do something, what kind of result do you usually get? I don't want to. It's the same thing when your parents tell you, take out the trash. I don't want to. But your parents find ways to get you to do it. Screaming at you, or if you don't take out the trash, I'm going to take away your Xbox. Or, Ava, if you don't take out the trash, I'm going to shave your head. And Ava's like, yes, Father. And she takes out the trash because she doesn't want to look like Mr. Bellamy. Be a tiny version of Mr. Bellamy. So they help raid British outposts. The Native Americans are doing the dirty work for the French. But
Fortunately for the English, there's a group of Native Americans called the Iroquois, Irquois, Iroquois, not Iroquois, Iroquois, that are actually the most powerful group of Native Americans. They don't love the British, but they hate the Indians that are fighting with the French. So the Iroquois side with the British to get British stuff, like weapons, tools, stuff that can benefit them, and an opportunity to kill their enemies that side with the French. There are 5 tribes, and the Iroquois Confederacy is kind of a precursor to the United States. Like, for instance, our people that form our government, we're using the Iroquois Confederacy as a model because it's very clear. The Mohawk are a very powerful tribe, and the Oneida are very powerful, and the Onondaga are very powerful. The Cayuga, the Seneca, they are powerful, but if we combine 5 powerful nations of Indians, they are really very powerful. Or, as I would like to say, more powerfuler than they would have been separately. It's kind of like America. The 50 states, most of the 50 states are large enough that they could be countries. I mean, even Nebraska, compared to the size of a European country, we could be a country. Texas, California, Alaska, Florida, those are huge. They could certainly be countries. But they're not, because we all, the 50 of us, understand that together we're much more powerful. Later this week, a hurricane is going to hit the Gulf Coast of Florida. So Floridians are fleeing. They're getting the heck out. Once the damage is done, who helps pay to rebuild the damage that's caused from a hurricane? The government. Where's the government get its money? Taxes. Who pays the taxes? We do. So Nebraskans are going to help Florida. If there's a natural disaster that happens in Nebraska, Floridians are paying taxes that are going to help us rebuild. That's the power of having 300 million, 330 million people all together working for the same goal, and that's prosperity for all of us. So we'll help with the problems that they've got. But this kind of creates, by the way, when I was in 3rd grade, my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Arian, I remember all of my teachers, but I was from a really small school. Mrs. Arian was a really good teacher, and she taught us some stuff that I don't even know that we need to know. Like, I used to make people memorize the 5 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, and then after a while, I'm like, who really cares? You could look it up if you want to know, but knowing that the Iroquois were a very powerful group of Indians, that's all you really need to know. She made us memorize the 5 Great Lakes, which I'm going to guess none of you can name. But she used a silly sentence. And I still remember it today, and this is 40-some years ago. Mrs. Arian said, she made Harry eat onions. And I'm like, what is it? Okay, the first letter of each word in that sentence is the first letter of one of the Great Lakes. So she is Superior, Maine, Michigan, Harry, Huron, Eat, Erie, Onions, Ontario. So for some reason, because of some silly little thing that my 3rd grade teacher taught me, I know the name of the 5 Great Lakes. I don't have to study it. I just know it. So if we wanted to do the same thing, if for some reason I made you memorize the 5 tribes of the Iroquois, what if we had a silly sentence like, Claire only marries old sardines? It doesn't make any sense, except for Claire really likes sardines, but we've got that up here. So Claire, Cayuga, only Oneida, marries Mohawk, old Onondaga, and sardines, Seneca. So there are easy ways, mnemonic devices to remember stuff like that. So the British send young officer George Washington into the Ohio River Valley with the intention of building a fort. So Washington takes about 40 soldiers and maybe 13 or 14 Native Americans. And as they're headed out into this vast open territory, the French find out that the British are on their way. So they send a young garrison of mostly Native American and a few French troops, along with a diplomat named Joseph Jumonville. A diplomat is a non-soldier, so he's like a talker. If you're going to create a treaty or a compromise over any of this territory, it would be Joseph Jumonville that would do this. He had 5 brothers who were military guys, including one of his brothers that was in charge of the fort at exactly the place where George Washington was supposed to build his fort. So literally, Washington gets out to this territory, and he wants to build a fort on top of the hill near what is today Pittsburgh, and he looks up, and the French had already built a fort there. So he's like, no. Anyway, Washington finds out that the French are out looking for him, so he gets together with his Native American allies, and he surrounds the French. A battle ensues that lasts 15 minutes. Today we call it the Battle of Jumonville Glen, because Jumonville is killed there. In this battle, the British are able to capture all of the Frenchmen and their Indian allies, maybe 15 or 30 prisoners. Jumonville is wounded. They're all tied up. George Washington is supposed to be an honorable man. He's taken prisoners, and you're not supposed to torture or punish prisoners. But one of the Native Americans that's with George Washington, his name is the Half King. That's why I was making fun of King with his hat earlier. The Half King is a Native American who hates the French. In fact, he hates the French so much that he goes up to wounded Jumonville with a tomahawk, crushes his skull, and witnesses claim that the Half King was pulling the brains out of Jumonville's head and washing his hands with them. So you can picture this savage Native American washing his hands with the brains of Joseph Jumonville. And while he's doing it, he says, "This is in retribution for the death of my father, who you had killed, boiled, and eaten." So this Half-King Indian was trying to get revenge for the death of his father. I'm not sure if it was the Frenchmen that killed and boiled and ate his father, or if it was the Indians that Jumonville was sided with. But there's a lot of hatred. So George Washington now is in a lot of trouble. He's attacked by the French at his fort called Fort Necessity. By the way, Fort Pitt is up on top of the hill. That's the French fort. Fort Necessity is on the bottom of the hill near the river in a marsh. If you're playing paintball or airsoft or Nerf war, where's the best place to put your fort? On a hill, because you can see your enemies from all distances. And if you have cannon or artillery, you can put your cannon facing the enemy, and they've got to attack you up a hill. It's a lot harder to attack uphill than it is downhill. We'll talk more about that in an incident later on. But Washington is overwhelmed and eventually has to surrender to the French. So his first attempt at fighting, terrible failure. While he surrenders to the French tell him, "We will let all of you and your men go. We're not going to kill any of you, but you have to sign this document." George Washington doesn't speak French. There is an interpreter among Washington's men, but he's only kind of good. So he says, "What does this say?" And the interpreter says, "Well, it says here that the French will let you go and you admit your defeat." And George Washington's like, "Yep, we'll live to fight another day. We're going to go free." What the interpreter left off was at the end there was sort of like a PS. "I, George Washington, admit to the assassination of Joseph Jumonville, the French diplomat." George Washington, in signing this treaty, admits to committing war crimes against the French. That's a big no-no. The English are now guilty of doing something illegal and immoral and wrong, even during warfare. Washington did not know that's what he signed. He finds out later, and as he marches his men back to America, to the colonies, he's like, "Oh, they're going to hate me. I'm such a loser. I lost." And instead, they treat him as a hero. That's weird. There aren't very many losers in history that get a hero's welcome. But George Washington had a quality, a characteristic about him that is super rare among all people. It's a word that we use today called charisma. George Washington was just likable. Everybody liked him. He's not even particularly friendly by all accounts. He really didn't like to be around people. He's a great leader. He could boss people around and people would listen to him. But when he'd have parties and stuff, he's like, it was miserable for him because he didn't like hanging around people. He wasn't particularly funny. He was kind of even rude sometimes. But there was something about him that just drew everyone in.
everybody liked George Washington. It's kind of like when we look at most of our leaders, most of these men have some level of charisma. But when we look at the ones that we've elected most recently, what do you think? Does everyone like Joe Biden? No, in fact, it kind of seems like either you love him or you hate him. Is that kind of true? How about Donald Trump? Kind of love him or hate him, right? Sort of true. President Obama, sort of the same. George Bush, sort of the same. Bill Clinton, actually Bill Clinton was fairly popular. He's a Democrat, but a lot of Republicans liked him. But to get to a president that had that charisma, that just natural likability, we probably got to go all the way back to Ronald Reagan. Yeah, just to give you an idea, Claire's exactly right. Just to give you an idea of how popular he was at running for his second term, so his second election or re-election, 49 out of the 50 states cast their electoral votes for him. It didn't matter if you were Democrat or Republican. You liked Ronald Reagan. That is super rare. Whereas today, most of our leaders, our modern leaders, are pretty divisive, which means they split us into two groups. What would happen someday if we get a political leader that we all like? America will be great again. Anyway, so George Washington gets his. By the way, there's one more story that I'm going to quit for today, because this is going to make for a long recording anyway. George Washington fighting in the French and Indian War. It's no secret that George Washington is the best horseman in America. Nobody rides a horse better than George Washington. It doesn't matter what horse, he can hop on it and booyah, he's just really good. Well, he's fighting in a battle against the French, and there's bullets whizzing by, and you can just imagine, he's riding on his horse, bullets flying by, there's cannonballs exploding, and all of a sudden Washington's horse gets shot out from under him. Well, he had taken his horse that morning and he tied a pillow to the saddle. This is a great horseman, but he's sitting on a pillow because on that particular day, at that particular time, George Washington was suffering from a really bad case of hemorrhoids. Most of you are like, I don't know what that is. It's a really bad sore on your rear end. So can you imagine if you had a really bad sore on your rear end? Bouncing up and down on a horse would not be very comfortable. So he puts a pillow on his saddle to charge into battle. His horse goes down. It's been shot. George Washington's laying on the ground like, oh my gosh, now what? When a riderless horse goes running by, its rider has been shot off. So George reaches up and grabs the reins of this riderless horse, and he quickly throws himself up on top of the horse. Again, bullets whizzing by. And he thinks, uh-oh, he forgot the pillow off of his saddle. So during the heat of battle, climbs off of his horse, crawls over to his dead horse, unties the pillow, goes back over to his new horse, takes the time to tie the pillow back on so he can resume fighting with a nice soft saddle. George Washington was fearless in the face of battle. I would think that if I had a sore rear end and there were bullets flying at me, I would really quickly forget about the fact that my rear end was sore. But he was worried about it apparently. So kind of gives you an idea of the quality of the character of George Washington. He had issues, but the dude was stone cold fearless. He didn't have a pet name, by the way. His real name was George Washington. His father died when he was 11, and he was raised by a half-brother named Lawrence. So Lawrence was kind of like a dad to him. And I think that's where we'll stop for today. There is a video here that we might watch next time on Fort Necessity and how bad the situation really was for Washington and his men before he's eventually captured. But that's a good stopping spot for us today. Anybody have any questions? Brayden, you look like you have a question. Or maybe you're just gassing. Either one. Okay. All right, that's it.